I'm Sebastian St. James. You will be poor without dividends. And I'm here to tell you why. This is not a video about praising high dividend yield stocks as much as you'd like it to be, but it is about finding your missing dividends. And that's what we'll do today. I know you probably thought that your dividends were safely tucked up in bed, but I'm here to tell you today they are not. Like a wayward teenager, they've snuck out through the window, shimmied down the drain pipe, and they've run. They're on the lam, and today we need to track them down. This is the XJO over the last 30.2 years. What is the XJO? The XJO is the ASX 200, the top 200 stocks on the Australian Stock Exchange. 30.2 years, that's impressive. That's just like forever. Yes, I know, it's 1 year more than I've been alive. So let's take a look at the return over that period of time. 415%, that's impressive, but it's a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of 5.58%. Actually, that's not so impressive after all. 5.58%, that's kind of little more than I'd get in a bank, to be honest. And here's an example. This is Virgin Money, the Boost Saver with Go account, whatever that happens to be, 4.6% right now. Am I excited about Virgin Money? No, it's just an account I pulled out at random that has a high interest rate at the moment. But you can start to see over the entire period of the ASX, it really hasn't performed that well. So here it is, the ASX 200, 5.58% over its entire lifetime. In the bank, 4.46%. Yeah, it's about 1% difference. Here is the SPX, the US version of it, 95.1 years. Yes, that is forever, and that's how long I'm planning to live for. And we can see over this period of time, the S&P 500, or the SPX, has actually returned 22,762.8%. Wow, yes, I know it is impressive. Or a CAGR of 5.88%, but that's not that impressive. So let's add that in. The S&P 500 has beat the ASX 200 over that period of time. But look, it's 5.58 up to 5.88. Well, that's not much, but there we go. What about the Nasdaq? Isn't that up before me, everybody? Well, not at the moment it's not, but let's go back through history. The NDX, or the Nasdaq 100, has returned, well, it's all over the place, isn't it? 10,646.8%. Wow. Then that is 13.35%. Oh, actually, that's not too bad, come to think of it. So we'll add that to the list. The Nasdaq is clearly up the top. What's happened to the S&P 500? What's happened to the ASX 200? 5.58%, yes. So there you have it. It's sorted in the order of performance, and based on that, it's quite clearly exactly which index you should be investing in, right? No. There's actually a problem with my data. What is it? Do you know? Can you spot what's gone wrong with my data? All the clues are there in the video. You could possibly know. Well, here it is. The Nasdaq 100 has 13.35%. That was over 37.3 years, which is a long time, but it's not the same period as the S&P 500, which was over 95.1 years. Yes, that's right. The ASX 200 was over 30.2 years, and the bank account, that was just now. That's literally over no years. That's just literally right today. So if they're over different time periods, you can't really compare them. Well, to some extent you can. If I compare one index that's been around for 60 years, the other one's been around for 90 years, you could probably almost compare them because they've just been around for so long. The bank account, that's just literally today. You go back 3 years, what's happened? Oh, it was basically 0%. So that's not a fair comparison, is it? There is still something missing. For some reason, I don't feel entirely whole. What could it be? This is Willow, who seems to be eating a flower. What are you doing, girl? What's wrong with you? What teenagers do to rebel these days. Okay, Willow, finish eating your flower and then, can I have my dividends back, please? Good, thank you. We've found the missing piece in the investment puzzle, and particularly on the ASX. If you don't include your dividends, add them back in, you will be poor. So remember, the ASX 200 without dividends is basically 1% higher than the bank account. Let's go ahead and start to graph the ASX 200, and this time, let's include those dividends. And here we are. This is the XJO, which is the ASX 200, and the XJT, what's that? Well, that's the XJO plus the dividends, or the total return. Over the 1 year, that's the graph we can see there. Well, we see the red line is beating the blue. I mean, that's a good thing. It always will beat the blue. Why? How can I know for sure? Well, it's really just the blue plus the dividends, and dividends are never negative. So over the 1 year, it has returned 7.3%. That's the ASX 200 without the dividends. 12.2%, which is a total return. That's just amazing. Nearly double. On to the 2 year. Dividends versus no dividends. We see where actually there's a bit more of a gap with a red line there. Yeah, that's impressive. If you look there as a 0% line, so around about July 2022, another time in October 2022, you'd actually lost money on the ASX 200. But if you added back in your dividends, actually you did. Let's face it, one little period you did, a smidgen there. But yeah, it's quite a big outperformance, isn't it? But let's put that into numbers. CAGR of 4.61% without dividends, 8.98% with dividends, which is about the long-term historical average. So that's actually not so bad. Over the last 5 years with your dividends, the red line is doing very, very well. 23.4% without dividends, 50%, 50 exactly, well, it's probably rounded off, but 50% with dividends, a CAGR of 4.3% versus 8.44%. As it's going on in time, it's actually getting bigger and bigger. Yes, that's how compounding tends to work. Over 10 years, we see red, the gap is actually increasing. Yeah, that's what's happening. So a CAGR of 4.44% if you're without dividends, or 8.88%. Wow, these numbers are just so round and amazing. And yet they're true. I haven't artificially manipulated them or anything. So double if you add in your dividends. Over 15 years, what do we find? Well, the gap is going bigger and bigger, isn't it? 1.63% without dividends, 6.09% with hang on, we've lost all our earnings. What's going on? 1.63%, that's really something going wrong there. That is over 15 years. The global financial crisis is what's behind that. Over 21.4 years, which is our entire data set here, we notice the XJO earned 123%. Add back in the dividends is 450.6% or 3.82% or 8.29% if you'd actually kept your dividends in the market. So what have we learned? Number one, don't have a global financial crisis. It ruins absolutely everything. Certainly in the short term it does. And secondly, in Australia on the ASX, dividends are the growth engine of the market. So what would happen if you actually didn't invest in your dividends and took them out of the market? Well, let's see. So the total return over 21.4 years is 8.29%. The price part of that was 3.82%. The dividend part was 4.47%. Yes, it's higher than the price. And frankly, for a return of 3.82%, I can just leave my money in the bank. If you treat your dividends like pocket money, well, it comes to you like pocket money, doesn't it? And you spend it on, a brand new holiday. I've got my dividend money. You will, in fact, dramatically underperform your potential by more than half. Dividends are not money that you can just spend however you wish. They are a very major part of your investing component overall. So let's have a look at that. The dividends itself was 53.92% of the total return, more than half. So this is important for you to learn right now exactly how important dividends are to your overall growth strategy. And I don't want you to be asking me this question in 5 years' time. Sebastian, can you do a video on how I spent all my dividends, but my investments don't seem to be growing by much? Hopefully, in 5 years' time, that will not be you. DRP, Dividend Reinvestment Plan. Does that mean I should be using that on all my stocks? No, it doesn't mean that. It means reinvest your dividends in the market. You don't actually have to put them in the same shares, which is exactly what DRIP does. You can put them anywhere in the market you choose, as long as you put them back in the market and you're not spending them. That's the only thing that matters. In fact, when I get my dividends, I like to diversify and buy shares I don't already own. That's what I tend to do with my dividends personally. In so doing so, you actually de-risk your portfolio over time, just automatically. What if you're retired? Then of course you need to draw down on your savings, right? So how do dividends fit into that? Well, then dividends are fair game, but you have to ask yourself the question, what was my original plan? How much was I planning to draw down? Was it, say, 4%? If it was, for example, your dividends are returning 4.47%, no, you don't get to keep the whole thing. Stick with your plan. So in that case, you'd reinvest the 0.47% back into the market. It sounds small, but the amount that dividends actually give you is arbitrary. You've chosen probably an equally arbitrary number that you're going to draw down, so you stick to that. You don't draw more just because your dividends are more. Frittering away your dividends is a form of self-sabotage, but did you know it's even worse than I've let on? And here it is, franking credits. Oh, we've got to add them back in. Yes, that's right. Franking credits occur when a company earns profits and part of that profit is paid to the government in tax. Now what happens is that taxable component is actually given to you so you can offset your tax or maybe get some money back. And in Australia that's called franking credits. So here we are. We have now 3 indices in total on the ASX. The XJO, which is the S&P 500, you're probably familiar with that. The XJT, which is the ASX 200 plus the dividends, or total return as we call it. And the XJTF, which is the ASX 200 plus the dividends plus the franking credits. Yeah, they're your 3 indices. Some of you are fairly smart. You probably look at those indices and you say, yeah, I know them. I'm quite familiar with them. Actually, you don't. One of those indices I made up. It doesn't even exist. And there it is, the XJTF I have fabricated. It does not exist. That's the S&P 500 plus the dividends plus the franking credits. Now the data is real. The idea of getting your franking credits, adding it back in with your dividends to get a total return plus franking credits, that concept exists. But for some reason, there's actually no index that tracks that. I know, how amazing. But today, there is, because I am creating one. It's official. I have risen to the level of index god, where now I get to create my own indices. Now that I've created my own index, it's really a big advantage because I can now just plot that along with the other indices. So let's see how that goes. Here is the XJO, which is the ASX 200, versus the XJT, which is the ASX 200 total return, versus the XJTF, which is the ASX total return plus franking credits added in over the 1 year. And we have a new line, which is in orange, and you can see it's riding above the rest, of course, because it's adding back in the franking credits. Over the 1 year, ASX 200 has returned 7.3%. That's not bad on its own. Add in the total return, which is 12.2%, and add back in the franking credits, it's 14.1%. Yeah, that's a nice little rise there, isn't it? Over the 2 years, well, we find the orange, which is the franking credit component, is actually not as big a jump up as the dividends were over the flat index. Yes, of course, that's true because franking credits are a portion, that's the 30%, so it'll never be as big as the dividends itself. And over the 2 years, it's 9.4 or 4.61% CAGR, 18.8 if you add back in the total returns, or 8.98 or 10.57% per year if you add back in the franking credits. Yeah, that's not too bad. Over the 5-year period, we notice, yes, orange is doing very well there. ASX 200, 4.3%. Add back in your total returns, 8.44%. Add back in your franking credits, 9.94%. And here it is, 10.1 years, which is as far as we can go back with this particular data set. 60.6% over that time, or 4.82% for the actual index itself. Total return, 143% or 9.24%, plus franking credits is 180% or 10.8%. Yeah. So we found that the dividends itself added about half, slightly over half. How much extra do the franking credits add in? Well, let's take a look. Well, there it is. The price return was 4.82% over that period of time. The total returns, including the franking credits, was 10.8%. Therefore, the dividends and the franking credit, that component is 5.98%, which is 55.37% of the total return. Wow, that is impressive. So as you can see, if every time you got your dividends, you go on a cruise and you wasted 55% of your potential earnings over your lifetime, go straight into the sea. Now that we know all about dividends and how they're the growth engine on the ASX, the question is, what are the best dividend stocks on the ASX right now? Click here to find out, or if you've seen the video, click here.